In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So today we are observing All Saints' Day, which always occurs on November 1st. It is one of the 4 preferred days for baptisms, and is the only holy day that can be transferred to the following Sunday. Other holy days have to be transferred to a weekday or a Saturday. It is the second of 3 linked holy days: Halloween, All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day. And it occurs, as do many of our holy days, at a point of astronomic significance. That is, these 3 holy days fall close to the autumnal equinox that marks the beginning of the darker half of the year. And they are balanced by the 3 days of Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and the Easter Vigil that mark the beginning of the lighter half of the year, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, and that's where this was set up. Between these 2 sets of holy days, near the winter solstice, at the darkest period, we have Christmas, the Nativity of the Lord. And then opposite that, on June 24th, near the summer solstice, at the lightest period, we have the Nativity of John the Baptist. So as John decreases, Christ increases. Our Halloween is associated with a Celtic celebration of the dead, Samhain, that predates Christianity. It was thought that at this liminal time of harvest between the lighter and the darker half of the year, the doorway between the world of the dead and the living temporarily opened, and dead ancestors returned for hospitality. And this was a welcomed thing. But the opening also allowed the entry of potentially threatening fairies. We don't think of fairies as bad things, but they thought they could be threatening. So people would wear costumes to hide their identity from these potentially dangerous beings. And once disguised, they would go door to door and ask for food. To further protect them from the fairies, they would hollow out turnips. On pumpkins, this was Europe, they didn't have them, and carve frightening faces on them to use as lanterns. The church Christianized the Celtic festival by giving it new meaning. All Saints' Day is the day before All Hallows' Eve, the day before All Saints' Day, and All Hallows' Eve becomes Halloween. In the medieval church, those who had been martyred or had done a heroic deed for the faith were thought to skip purgatory and ascend directly to heaven. That was the medieval theology. And these saints were canonized and given a place on the church calendar, a specific day assigned for each one, as well as recognition on All Saints' Day of all of them. The rest of the believers, the rest of us, went to purgatory and were remembered on the following day, All Souls' Day, which is why it was divided like that. And at All Souls' Day, the church prayed for the rest of the souls because it was thought this would shorten their stay in purgatory. And candles were lit at that point, not to ward off fairies, but to lighten the souls of the dead in purgatorial darkness. And people also baked and distributed soul cakes to the poor in order to buy their dead ones some respite, sort of gifting the merit from that to the cause. All Saints' Day therefore sits between the lighter months and the darker months, the realm of the dead and the realm of the living, Celtic polytheism and Christian monotheism, saints and sinners. So now, as we enter the darker half of the year, we celebrate all the saints of God who have brought and are bringing light into the world in big ways and in small. I was standing in the gathering area at our last funeral observing people, and as I watched them enter the church, many greeted one another with sincere hugs. And I wondered to myself as I stood there, how do people thrive who do not have this in their lives? I know that people who do not belong to a spiritual community still have friends, but these hugs seem different to me. We gather together not merely because we find each other interesting or entertaining, which we are, but we gather together because we have realized something. Once we lose faith in this world, once once we realize that this world can never fulfill us, that we are all incomplete, and that we need the support of one another, at that point we develop a much deeper compassion for others who share our situation. Until we reach that point, however, we tend to believe that everyone is the master of his or her own fate and deserves whatever he or she gets. Very common thing. And people say often, I have worked hard for what I have, and of course they did. And many other people, they seem to forget, worked hard for what they did not get. Actually, with regard to spiritual development, I realized when I was a chaplain ministering to people in Stony Brook Hospital, and when we are sick, we tend to be, in some ways, even more ourselves, is that people tend to fall broadly into one of 4 groups. And I want to share that with you today. Some people have been taught a religion based on shame. That is, the belief that they are somehow inherently bad people. Not just incomplete people who need others, but bad people. Rather than being taught an all-embracing, all-loving God. And they've heard stories throughout their lives like, Christ died for you, and you ought to be grateful. Well, those stories imply that you're not grateful enough, and you never could be grateful enough. And it makes us feel as if we are disappointments to God. Lucky that God doesn't just strike us dead this very instant. People who have thus been misled tended to respond to me, I noticed, with a kind of extreme childlike fake welcome. Oh, hello, Father. They felt unworthy, and they worked overtime to conceal it. They needed to fool me, in other words, into believing that they were good boys and girls. Hello, Father. If they could fool me, maybe they could fool God. Their unfortunate religious education had left them feeling that the only way they could relate to God and to others was through disingenuousness and manipulation. In order to prove themselves, they either fawned upon those whom they considered to be above them, or berated those whom they saw as beneath them to make themselves feel good about themselves. And you would be surprised how often this happened. Of course, some have more self-control than others, but not infrequently. As soon as I exited the room, but was still within earshot, fawning would turn to yelling at the overburdened nurse in ways that I would not disgrace the pulpit to repeat. They never really felt that God loved them, did not realize that they were worthy of love, and therefore they really had little compassion for others. Their only hope, they thought, was to fool God. Another group of patients were those who were proud of having realized that religion is nonsense. When I asked whether they would like to talk, they would brusquely say no. I suspect that some say no because they want to see themselves as proud individuals who need no one, to reassure themselves that they are independent and in control. They would target spiritual care, the monks and nuns and priests and all those people who came there to do the work. They would target us for rejection because they couldn't really reject the nurses and doctors, not too much, because they would threaten their health, right? And they couldn't reject the aides and the cooks and the housekeepers and maintenance and all those people who work behind the scenes to keep it all going, because they never got to see them. But when I stepped in, or another one of my colleagues stepped in, then they could reject us. And that gave them a sense of control. These people had bought into secular individualism. The idea that the best a person can be is completely self-sufficient, owing nothing to anybody. Not long ago, I heard in the gym an advertisement that was repeated every 20 minutes in a cheery voice. And the words were, "Your most important relationship is going to be the one you have with yourself." We keep hearing these messages over and over from everywhere. This ideology is a radical form of divide and conquer. It makes us feel like we're in control, but actually it hands that control over to others, which is exactly what the commercial wanted, right? It separates us from one another at that most basic level, individual against individual, in order to better to manipulate us, to turn us into sources of revenue as we grow increasingly isolated and lonely and pour our dollars into attempting to comfort ourselves. There's a third group. That third group was those who, having been reduced by illness, become curious about religion. They wonder whether it might offer an answer to the isolation that is caused by suffering. I'm sure many of you have had pain or illness, and you can feel that it sort of draws us inside of ourselves. I met one young man in his 20s whose cancer had led him and his family to start going to church. He was new to the Christian thing, so I talked to him about prayer. I told him that the more honest and clear he could be with God, the better. We need never hide our feelings, our questions, our anger, our frustrations, our joys. The young man acknowledged that one result of the cancer was that his entire family had grown closer to each other. And this brings me to the final type of patient I tended to meet, those with a mature faith. They freely acknowledged, they did not conceal, they freely acknowledged their suffering and their concerns to me, and yet they maintained faith that ultimately everything would be okay. What they were going through was not fun, but they were not going through it alone, and they were confident that the universe was working itself out just as God had intended. They were filled with grace, and they had a twinkle in their eye, despite their situation. These were people who had matured through many years of spiritual formation. They didn't get there in a week or two. One woman told me that her faith began as a little girl when her grandmother took her to church. She would watch her grandmother before church saying prayers out of the prayer book, and she longed for the day that she would have her own prayer book from which to pray. That's where it starts, in seeing how much faith means to others, and seeing that through it we form a deeper, more meaningful connection. For the faithful, it's a joy to share with one another in good times and bad. We therefore affirm to one another that we thereby affirm to one another that we matter, that we are important, that we are worthy of love. Without this, it's more difficult to get through the months and years, through the illnesses and betrayals, the losses. Without the support of those who have deep compassion and confidence that all will be well in the end. And that's where we come in. Like the saints that have gone before us, we are privileged to be the emissaries of God to all who are willing to open themselves. We are the saints. And whenever we share that connection, a spark of light enters the darkness of the world. Amen.